Welcome everyone to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Is it 4 or 5? Did we post the last one?
I didn't.
Okay.
So I'm not counting anymore. Welcome back to our next episode for the most part. And we're recording this Saturday night as opposed to our traditional Sunday night.
Mm-hmm. We'll be back again tomorrow.
We will. But I felt like it was important for us to at least touch on this before episode 4. Because I've seen a few, I've just seen a few articles. I've seen a few reviewers talk about this. So, season 1, episode 3 drops, and when the credits roll, I felt like that was one of the best episodes of television that like I had seen in years.
And it seemed like that was the consensus. Like online, everybody was just like, "I'm so emotional. Like I keep crying. It was so good." Yeah.
And then I know this isn't healthy, but I do sometimes after the episode, I will sometimes like maybe like 20, 15 minutes later, I'll go on IMDb to see how people are like reviewing it. And so when I first went, it was like a 9 out of 10. And so I immediately knew, oh, some people are giving it a pretty low rating. Because I was like, this should have nothing less than like a 9.4, 9.5.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So 9 out of 10 was not good enough.
I knew what was, it never, so if a Rotten Tomatoes score, let's say it starts off at 100, that's a good sign that it will probably stay somewhere within the 90s once it's all said and done. Maybe rare occasions it'll drop to the 80s because as more come in, you're just bound to get negative reviews, and just it's like a GPA. The negative ones just hurt it more. Mm-hmm. So I knew if it initially starts at 9, the trajectory is going to make it a lot lower.
So where is it now?
It's at 7.9 right now.
No. That's wrong.
7.9 on IMDb. And what's crazy is this has 83,080 10 out of 10 votes, right? Mm-hmm. There's a few people, about 10,000 gave it a 9, which if you gave it a 9, like that's cool.
Oh yeah, this graph is very telling.
This has 42,649 1% votes.
Yeah, that's very telling. If the graph is literally like, it's literally like huge bar for 5-star, well for 10 out of 10. A bunch of tiny bars in the middle. And then the next big bar is the 1 out of 10. That's very telling because it's never going to be that, like you're never going to have those two extremes unless something fishy is going on.
Right. I was floored. I truly was because, and we talked a little bit about this with one of the comments that we responded to. They have expanded on every character so far. Why are we surprised that they expanded on Bill's? I don't understand that. In that first episode of the season, we got a lot more Sarah than we did in the video game. A lot more. With Sarah, she roams around the house a little bit, and then her father comes crashing in. And then it all hell kind of breaks loose. They pick her up in the car.
Day with her.
You don't see her in school. She doesn't visit her neighbors. You don't see her go to the watch guy to fix her dad's watch, to buy a new watch. You don't see any of that stuff. You don't see the breakfast scene. You don't see, none of that's there.
You have to expand on the characters because when you think about it, in the video game, there is obviously storytelling happening, but the majority of the time is the player
You're just playing
the
it.
Game.
Right.
And all of those things, they're going to take more time when you are playing, making mistakes, losing lives, trying again, versus in a television show when you are just trying to tell the story straight through. In order to have enough story, you have to add some stuff in there.
And like there's other things that I didn't really think about, like you don't get as many like facial expressions in a video game, but you need that in a TV show. Like you need all of that, which takes up time in the episode. I don't even know.
curious to know when people review bomb, what are they trying to achieve? Because it never does much, right? Like, it doesn't really taint the reputation of the show in any real way, because people always know when negative reviews are just review bombs and they're not genuine.
Right. But I think it's I guess it's their way of trying to express their frustration. It just doesn't translate into anything tangible.
This is what I find very interesting. See, on the flip side of this, which I'm using that term very generously because these are not equivalent situations, but when you have projects that have homophobic themes or racist themes or sexist themes, what people of color do, people in the LGBTQ community, women, their tactic is not to review bomb. Nobody does that. The tactic is don't watch it.
Yeah.
We boycott it. We simply don't go to see it. When Green Book came out with our good friend Mahershala Ali, who we all love and
one
respect,
of the greatest actors of this
absolutely
era.
phenomenal. And I was like, it kind of hurts to not go see this movie because I really do love him.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't go. Like, people did not. I don't know anybody who saw that movie, because once we heard what people were saying about it and the way that they had sort of distorted that story and the white saviorism and all that kind of stuff, we were just like, we're not interested in this and we're just not going to go watch it.
Yeah.
And that was that. And to this day, like, people don't talk about that movie. Mahershala Ali won an Oscar for that film, and I have not heard it spoken about since.
He apologized, actually.
He apologized while he was receiving his award. But what I'm trying to say is, like, the fact that people did not go to see that movie, it sort of erased the movie from, like, pop culture. Like, it's just not discussed anymore. At the time, it was people were talking about it. There was all the Oscar buzz, not just for him, but for the movie as a whole. But since then, it's done because we'd all decided, like, we're just not going to make this into a lasting conversation. We're going to decide that this movie is not going to withstand time and history. We're going to, dead it, basically. And, like, the film bros, all those people, the people who get upset, like the people who are mad at Ms. Marvel when Captain Marvel and Ms. Marvel, when people were mad about Black Panther, Shang-Chi, the Eternals, they never have the backbone to not go watch.
They always go.
They always go watch. They don't have it in them to just boycott, essentially, like what everybody else does, and just decide we're not going to partake in this. They hate watch it on purpose. They know going in what it's going to be,
and they'll still go,
and they will still go just so they can get online later on and rant about it to their 3 followers and then go post a negative review. And I just want to know why.
And what's so interesting, like what you just said there, is it's almost like they want to keep creating the world that they wish they could currently live in, right? They'll trash a movie before it comes out. They'll go and see it, and they'll give it a negative review, and then they'll point to that negative review and say, "This is why woke movies make it go broke," right? Like it is like baffling how absurd it is. The other thing that I think is so. This is where I get a little annoyed. You keep hearing people talk about this gay agenda, this diversity agenda. Woke agenda. This woke agenda.
AKA black people.
But it's not just black people, because they use that term with queer people, like with The Last of Us.
They do.
What I find so funny about their usage of this idea of agenda is agendas are not inherently immoral.
They're not immoral at all.
No. You just don't like the agenda.
Yeah.
Right? The problem, I'm not denying that there's an agenda Neil Druckmann is pursuing here. He wants cinema to be more inclusive. He wants TV shows to be more inclusive. The problem is you just don't like the agenda. You were fine with the conservative agenda with excluding certain people out of films for decades. Black people, not included. Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, Latinate people, not included. Queer folk, not included. You were fine with that agenda. So your problem is not with agendas. Your problem is the worldviews that are being presented now in current pop culture.
See, the issue is, though, they would not view what was happening before as an agenda.
It is, though.
No, it is. I agree with you. But the problem is that is the issue, though, is that they cannot see that as an agenda. To them, that is just the norm.
That's the norm.
That's just the standard. That's that's the expectation. So anything that deviates from that is going to be seen as a problem because they're like, well, there's no agenda there. There's no plan to them. They're just like, that just is what it is.
Yeah.
Everything else is this other thing. The same way that we think about race. Whiteness is just what it is. It just exists. It's the standard. It's normal. It just is. Everything outside of that, though, exists in comparison to it. So anything outside of whiteness is always going to feel like a deviation from the norm,
right?
Because they don't have. I'll just say how I was going to say it. They don't have the ability to think about themselves, whiteness, as just another group
as
amongst
being
all
the
of
norm.
the others. Yes. To them, there is whiteness as a thing being just the normal thing that everybody should assimilate into, basically.
Yeah.
And everything else just exists in comparison to that.
Yeah.
Versus being like, you have these types of experiences over here, then you have this experience here. It's all just a different experience. And all of it is normal. All of it is the norm because for Black people, Blackness is the norm. This is the life that I live. Seeing Black people every day is normal for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really the issue, is that they can't see what was happening before you had just a smidge, really not that much, just a little bit more diversity in film. They can't see what was happening before that as an agenda. To them, that was just normal.
That's just them ignoring history. Mm-hmm. Like you can't look at,
because it wasn't an accident that everybody was white in movies.
No.
Yeah.
No. You can't take some like the most basic form of exclusion, right? With Jim Crow, right? Look at how they had to justify what they did with neighborhoods in order to make this seem normal. Newspapers, sermons from the pulpit, justifications with absurdity in fake science. All of these ideas to justify like what they did to treat Black people. That is a damn agenda. Like you are trying to persuade a large group of people and convincing them to believe what you believe. I don't understand how like I get it, but it is just frustrating. And there's another thing that I thought about when you were saying, it's not even just that minority groups will boycott. Sometimes we just kind of suffer through it. Mm-hmm. Look how long we went enjoying the MCU before we got Black Panther. And it was very noticeable that there were not any Black characters aside from Rhodey. That's it. And then they came in with Falcon later on. Yeah, we had Nick Fury, but I mean as in like a prominent Black figure.
Yeah, there was no central character.
No. And I'm trying to think of like their bandwidth to attempt in enjoying a piece of art, whether it is a movie or a TV show, when they're not represented is either significantly low or it is non-existent.
They just aren't. They don't have they're not in the habit of doing it. Like I always think about this with books. Man, sometimes I like to go when I go to bookstores. I just like to go to the young adult section and just look and see what's there. And the young adult book section today is so different from when I was a kid.
Tell me more about that.
There are so many more books with Black people, Black women in particular. And in all genres, you'll look and there's like Black science fiction books, there's Black fantasy books, there's Black little romance books. Like there is so much there. When I was a kid, that you had Sharon Draper. If you know, you know. Any person who was any Black kid who was a reader in like the early 2000s, Sharon Draper was your girl. She was holding it down for Black young adult literature, and that was it. Okay. And so I just built up the habit of reading books about people who didn't look like me. And it's not like it was left ambiguous. They describe the characters in the book. They'll tell you this is a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Okay, they're not leaving it as a mystery. But you just find other ways to connect to the character. You connect to the experiences that they're having. You connect to the interests that they have. You can, or sometimes maybe there's nothing to connect to, but you are just invested in the story enough that it doesn't matter that the central character does not resemble you exactly.
Find a similarity.
You find other ways, and if there isn't a similarity, you just get invested in what's happening with this character, and you just go for the ride. But that's like, it was habitual. I didn't even think about it when reading books. It wasn't a big deal for me. I mean, I would always appreciate it when I found a book about a black kid that I was like, oh, I enjoy this. And, that was always appreciated. But when I was reading another book, I wasn't like throwing this to the side. I can't connect, so it's no good. I can't get through this book because the character is not familiar to me. No, it just wasn't a thing. And it's the same thing with movies. It's even easier to do that with movies because it's a visual experience. You're not having to create it in your head like when you're reading.
That's true.
You're just observing. There are so many movies that I've watched. I have no connection, no resemblance to anybody in that show or movie, and it doesn't matter because I'm just going along for the ride. I'm just there to watch what happens, and it's fine. But I feel like because white people have forever basically have been given the privilege of having every form of media cater to them at all levels, from when you're a child reading books in a classroom to when you're an adult watching movies and TV shows. Everything has catered to them, and so the minute that it steps just a little bit outside of it, they are completely unfamiliar with the experience of finding a way to connect with the character whose lived experience is vastly different from yours, or even just finding a way to empathize, because really that's what it is. It's not even always about connecting with the character. You might not have anything in common with them, but you empathize with the character because you care for them.
Are you dead inside? Like, I don't understand.
You care for the character, so you empathize with what they're going for, and you care about what happens to them. But it's just a foreign idea for them. And I just do want to go back just one step when we were talking about agendas, etc. I just really want to say, erasure is not accidental.
No.
Like, all of those decades, centuries even, you could argue, if you're including other forms of media outside of like TV, of media centering whiteness and white experiences, it's not like, just what do they say, like a man of his time. Yeah, no, first of all, that doesn't exist because there were always voices. There was always people. No matter where you go in history, no matter where you go, you could start at the American Revolution. There were always people from the margins speaking out and pointing out the absurdity and the injustices of
the hypocrisy
of America's of enslavement and of all sorts of atrocious actions by the American government. That was always happening, and the powerful people knew because you can read them talk about it. Okay, so that idea that they're just a product of their time, everybody thought like this was just the norm. No, that's not true, number one. And number two, they purposely, it's a purposeful decision to erase people from the public eye. That is, you do that on purpose, and you do it for a reason. I.e., if you are enslaving an entire race of people and you need the public at large to sign off on that, to be okay with that, well, yeah, you can't make media centering their experiences, because the minute you do, you're highlighting your own hypocrisy and the atrocity of what you are doing. It's not accidental when people choose to erase people from our media. They do it on purpose. Hence, it's an agenda.
Right.
And what you're seeing now, I don't even know if agenda is the right word. It's making a wrong right. That's all it's doing. It's making up for lost time. It's taking something that has gone on for years and years and years and caused a lot of pain and impacted people's ability to empathize with the experiences of others. All they're trying to do now is make that right. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. And you said something earlier on about you had to find other ways to connect with these like white characters that just didn't look like you. It just kind of feels like the rules that, like, let's use white people for example, of like that I don't see color. You definitely see color, but you were consistently asking us to not see color when we consume your media, while the second we try to pivot something that's more inclusive, they lose their mind. Because for a lot of years I had to not see color with these superheroes. Iron Man, I had to just not see that. Captain America, who's one of my favorite superheroes, I had to just accept the fact he's not black. I had to accept that.
And he probably could have been racist.
Might have been. Hulk, Ant-Man, all of them. I had to accept the fact that none of these guys look like me. But still, I could go into that theater and enjoy myself. I don't understand how you are unable to do that. And I understand when it comes to the gender sexuality conversation, a lot of it has to do with like your religious upbringing. But even still, I get very frustrated with that because I'm like, how could you watch episode 3 and more focused on the friction you feel, the tension you feel with your faith than you do with just, this is a genuine love story. That's all that this was, a genuine love story. And if you are not able to find ways to enjoy media that is not representing you at that particular moment, you are going to miss out on a lot of beautiful stories, my friend.
I also just want to say, it's pretty rare. Even amongst like Christians, at least like the Christians that you and I know. Usually when I talk to like other young Christians who are maybe, let's say still growing, okay, in their acceptance of people in the LGBTQ community. Usually, even those people will say things like, I mean, you know, I don't really care what other people do. Like, it's fine. I just don't, you know, like, I just don't want to do that, or I just don't want to, you know, like, that's the language people use. It's very rare that people will outwardly admit, like, I do not like gay people. Well, and I do not.
I think that thing that they say, I don't think it's true.
I don't think it's true either. But that's what I'm trying to say is that if that really was how you felt, then watching two fake fictional characters on TV be in a same-sex relationship should not at all bother you, because you yourself said, I don't really care. I'm gonna let other people live their lives, but I just don't think it's right. That's what they always say. They say fake. Personally, I just don't like it.
That's what was really frustrating me. It's almost like underneath it all, there is a sense of shame in their belief. Because you know how absurd you sound right now. You're pointing out to the lack of zombies. You're pointing out to the lack of Joel and Ellie. You're trying to find these rare components of the episode and exhaust them to give you a narrative to latch onto, because you don't want to say what you are really feeling. Just say you are uncomfortable because you don't like seeing queer people on screen. Just say that. Admit that, and at least we can have an actual semi-honest dialogue, maybe even productive, because at least we can try to get to see each other where we're at. But if we're spending time just running around in circles, like I'm trying to convince you why we didn't need to have every other scene show a zombie. At that point, you are intentionally being media illiterate, purposefully, because we're not having honest dialogues at that point. And that, I think, is what frustrates me. I've had conversations with peers. I've had conversations with people online. I've had conversations even with people in our comment section. I'm like, what? People are like, I didn't sign up for this. Sign up for what? What is it that you... What is it? You just don't like the fact that you can't ignore it anymore. In the same way, white people feel like they have ownership on all the popular factions like media, news outlets, education, school. Cis het people are the same way. You feel like you should be able to watch pop culture television and movies and not have to see things that make you uncomfortable. That is a level of arrogance and supremacy that you have been told that you are entitled to. That's not how being inclusive works. And as a Christian, you should feel the same way.
I was going to say, a large part of the problem, that whole thing of like, I did not sign up for this, what that really is, that's like a very Christian mentality. It's this mentality that a lot of Christians have, and I'm saying this as a Christian, like just, but
We're
like
both Christians, yeah.
Yeah. But there's a mentality that a lot of Christians have that even just being in the proximity of something that you consider quote unquote sin without saying something about it taints you.
Yeah.
Like I remember, and it's because of our theology about salvation and our and the whole thing about evangelizing and saving people and saving souls. That's really what it is. I remember as a child when I started going to public schools and like, you know, meeting friends who like didn't believe in God or were from other religions and things like that. And I remember internally worrying and feeling this pressure of like, if I don't say something, if I don't tell them about God and invite them to church, like, am I complicit if they don't end up going to heaven? Like, it's like this,
like complicit in their soul.
Yes, it's a real anxiety, and it's embedded in you very young, and it takes a lot of unlearning. And so that whole idea of like, I didn't sign up for it, that's really all it is. It's because here's the thing, like, even if you're a person who believes that who has been taught to believe that being in a same-sex relationship is immoral, it goes against God, whatever. Even if you have been taught to believe that, honestly, you should still be able to watch a television show where other people that have nothing to do with you or your life are in a same-sex relationship. But because Christians believe that even just engaging with things that are oppositional to their beliefs is making them complicit in it, they can't do that. It's the same thing with pronouns when you're talking about transgender people or dead naming people. Well, Christians believe that if they use a person's correct and preferred pronouns or their preferred and correct name, that they are now complicit in something that they have been taught is wrong. They cannot separate themselves from other people because we are taught to believe that we are responsible for the souls of other people. Right. And so it makes it difficult for them to distance themselves from things that, like, putting aside bigotry, like, you should still be able to just, you know, engage with people where they are. But so many Christians are incapable of doing that because of how deeply ingrained that is.
And this is where I've also asked the question of, like, have you reflected on what loving people in the LGBTQ community actually means to you? Tangibly speaking, practically, on a relational level. If you are one where you are looking to maintain somewhat of a fundamentalist perspective on that theology, right? What does that look like? Practically, right? Well, if that person is telling you the way you can show me love is to use my preferred pronouns, and you say, no, I'm not going to do that, how are you showing love? It can't just be what you feel inside, right? Because if love is a verb, it's an action. How are you going to show that gay or transgender person that you love them when they're telling you what they need to feel love, and then you say no? I
will tell you exactly what their answer is, because this is another problematic aspect of Christian theology. The problem is people are not... In the words of our good friend, I won't put his name out there, but our good friend who is a pastor once said that some people are too heavenly minded. So a lot of Christians believe that the best way for a Christian to show love is to prioritize a person's salvation rather than their comfort. on earth. So they feel it's a matter of salvation. And so if I am pushing you to, if I am being like steadfast in my beliefs around you and I'm refusing to compromise anything, and I'm, constantly reminding you of what I think about you as a person and your worth, essentially, or your identity, that to them is showing love because they're concerned about your salvation. They think that they're saving you. I told you, like, my parents, they remember, they like, I won't get into it, but like whatever. Some church members sent my parents this letter talking about all sorts of just very like weird things about like wearing certain things and wearing jewelry and all this stuff. Just lots of like very conservative beliefs. But the entire letter was saying like, I really didn't want to have to do this. I hate to have to be the one to tell you this, but like it was my duty. Like I felt this burden because it's my job to make sure that you make it into heaven. That's really it. And so because Christians are taught to think so much about the end of the world and where people are going and where your soul ends up, instead of focusing on how can you serve and provide and love for people in the here and now, a lot of their idea of showing love is distorted because they're not thinking about the here and now. They think this doesn't matter. It's that whole thing of like in the world but not of it, or like we hear it all the time of like all this worldly stuff doesn't matter because when we get to heaven, like that's all that counts. It's actually like people say all the time like it's normal, but when you really take it to its logical end, it's a really detrimental theology to have, that nothing on this earth is of any importance except for what you do to get to heaven. It actually is not. It's going to end up with it leads to people being harmful because they don't care about what happens here.
I will say not only does it lead to people being harmful, it leads to people being lonely while they're here, because how can you truly be present with the humans that you are supposed to be having relationships with if the only thing that you're thinking about is the future? You're not present here right now to really grieve with the suffering that someone's going through, the joy that they're experiencing, right? If they're suffering right now, doesn't matter, God's coming back. If they just got a new job that they're super excited about, those worldly things don't matter, God's coming back. How are you able to make a real connection if you're not present in the now? And if to be present in the now means that you have to be in community with people. And to be in community with people, you have to truly care what they're going through on a daily basis. And the other thing that I think we need to start talking about, that I don't know if people are honest yet. I think Christians still to this day are comfortable in creating a hierarchy of merit based off of sin. I think we are comfortable with certain sinners, with being amongst certain people of the world than other people of the world. Mm-hmm. And I think we are more comfortable with accepting that it's not just about me wanting to not indulge and accept your ideal form of love. It is also like, I don't want to be in proximity to you because of how sinful you are. Like that, I think, is also part of the problem. It isn't just about I love you, but I can't condone what you're doing because I want to save your soul. It is, I don't think I have the bandwidth to fully love you because your sin is blocking me from loving you the way that normal love between two people should exist as. Like that, I think, is also part of the problem. Because when I hear people talk that are Christians and they talk about people in the LGBTQ community, you don't sound like someone that is full of love. You sound like an asshole. You sound like a terrible person. You sound like someone that is homophobic and is lucky to have an ancient scripture that you can use to justify that. Mm-hmm. What does that sound like to you? As a black person, what does that sound like to you? Think about your own history. Do you not hear similarities in the tactics that you're using? And that's why I get a little frustrated when I hear people say that, like, oh, sorry, I'm just too conservative on this topic. You are not a religious conservative person. You're not. You just don't like gay people. You just don't like transgender people, because everything else that you should be following that would make you be described as a conservative, you don't care about. You're not doing. You're not being consistent with it. It's just this one topic that you have a problem with, and you'll just say, I'm just too conservative. You're not a conservative. You're not. You just don't like gay people. You just don't like transgender people. Can we at least admit that? They won't, because they know what that sounds like. And that's where I get very frustrated. And I lose the patience in that conversation, and I just don't engage with it because no one's being honest right now. We're just not.
Yeah, people want to be homophobic, but they don't want to be homophobic. You know, like
check all the boxes. They'll check all the boxes. But the moment you put the title at the top of the page,
they're like,
how
now
dare you?
Hold on.
Excuse me. You don't know my heart.
Oh my gosh. I think I do know your heart, actually.
Nonetheless, what also makes the review... I know we got off topic.
We got on such a... This is how all our conversations go, by the way. Just people, sorry.
The review bombing also makes you look like a loser in many facets. One, as we said earlier, if you review bomb, you get no ass. I'm sorry. You don't. You don't. Get off your computer. Get off your phone. Go make some friends. Turn off the Reddit chats where you're just stuck in your little silos with other dweebs. Go make some friends. You get no ass if you find validation in review bombing a television show. Neil Druckmann is not going to read 67 Rollin X28 with their username and say like, damn, he really got me. Oh, let me rewrite Ellie's story now. That's not going to happen. You're a dweeb. Also, the reason why I feel validated in that, the viewership soared another 12% after episode 3. The only television show right now on HBO Max that is beating The Last of Us in viewership is House of the Dragon, which is not a fair comparison because they've already been backed by Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they had a whole...
Which means that objectively, this is a successful show. This show will win awards. They will win awards for that episode.
Oh, yes.
Accept it.
Ron Swanson's going to be up for an Emmy.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Accept this new world that we're living in that is attempting to be more inclusive, or don't consume the media, because you are going to lose either way. Either you find it in your heart to be reflective and learn to care more about people, or you are going to miss out on a lot of great storytelling, a lot of beautiful storytelling, miss out on a lot of beautiful characters. That was a phenomenal story they told about two people trying to find love in a world that does not give them the opportunity comfortably to create it. And they found a way to do it. They were even able to go out on their own terms in a world where that agency is frequently taken away because you've got clickers that can turn you infected, and you've got Nazi governments that want to kill you if you don't abide by their rules. They still found a way. How are you like, none of that shit matters, bro? None of that matters because they're gay. Like, that's just, it's bizarre. I'm sorry. I don't know. But either way, you review bombing, it's not going to give you the outcome that you want. I think you're being left behind with your worldview, and I think that bothers you. I think that's what it comes down to.
That's really all it is. It's like what they say when they say that the left has more cultural influence, but the right has more structural influence, and both sides is jealous of the other. So the right is always, you know, they talk about themselves with all of this victimhood language, right?
Mm-hmm.
They feel like people are out to get them, and and none of it really makes sense, because when you look at the data, it's like, actually, no, all of our systems of power and structure actually
work in your favor.
Work in your favor,
mm-hmm.
And there's efforts being put in right now to make that not happen, but it's not going so well. What you're feeling is that when you go out and you go online, when you go on Twitter, when you go on, TikTok, whatever, you're feeling the societal pressure between what you believe and what where pop culture as a whole is going.
Mm-hmm.
But frankly, there's no real... I don't want to say that has no impact, because obviously it does, because when it was on the flip side for people of color and other marginalized identities, it has an impact for sure. But when you are a person that has societal privilege because of the systems that we live under, the fact that TV and media and things like that are not always, because sometimes they still are, but are not always catering to you, you're going to be fine. Like, it's really not going to have any practical harm for you at all. And so this mentality of like, I just feel like it, I don't know, what does it mean to be American anymore? And I just feel like, all of that stuff is like, it just doesn't, truly, it doesn't matter. Truly, you'll be fine. You will be able to put food on your table and a roof over your head, and you'll be just fine. And there will always be movies about white people. You don't have to worry. There will always be movies about straight people. There will always be movies about men. You do not need to be concerned. It may not be the most popular thing all the time, but it will be there.
You know who touched on something similar to this with whiteness? It's a show that I don't know if you really care too much about. It's called Atlanta.
Don't do this to me. Don't shame me.
I will. Because they said something very similar to what you were doing with the idea of race and racism and slavery, for example, is a story for them that they can choose to read or not. But for black people, it is an ever-existing ghost. Mm. And for the first time in our country's history, you could argue, with the reparations conversation, there is at least an attempt to normalize a conversation about what equity could potentially look like. And that, in many ways, means dismantling whiteness and the structures that they have. But he comforts the guy who has to consider paying reparations with saying, like, you will be fine. Your life, once this is through, you can essentially just keep living.
Yeah.
You may not be on top, but you can at least be human now, because I don't think like they have considered what it robs them of. And just think about the conversations that we've had in the last 35 minutes or so. Your status of being on top, whether it is a racial hierarchy or a gender and sexuality hierarchy, it has robbed you of being able to not only empathize across the board, you can't even empathize with stories that are transforming lives in the moment. People were talking about this episode as something that had them thinking existentially about the concept of love. You missed out on that. You should feel scared about that you missed out on this transformative experience because of what you were told that you should be entitled to. I would feel bad about that. And I think about where I was like 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. I would not be able to enjoy this media, and I would have missed out on good storytelling, something that has changed my perspective on my idea of love, because the only thing that I've been thinking about is I'm not trying to see that. That's sad.
I wonder if subconsciously there is part of that fueling the rage and anger, just a feeling of feeling left out.
And it just keeps going. Because
Yeah.
you something that you should feel included in, you see it as something as exclusion. What do we even do with that? We can be as inviting as we can, because even in that story, 2 white men.
I was just about to say, frankly, I don't have nothing to common with either of those men.
2 white men.
I am a straight black woman.
What did it? Very rarely could you find something that we connected with.
Yeah, I just cared. I just thought it was beautiful.
Because even with Bill, yeah, he's a guy. He he's like a male, right? So like I could potentially no, he was one of them quacky Alex Jones cucks. So I can't relate with him there. So like I still had to find a way. They couldn't even do that. Oh yeah. What a long rant, but I feel a lot better now. I had to get that off my chest because that was really pissing me off.
I hope these people find joy.
I'm worried for them because
I really hope.
something's got to fill that void. Or like we said before, people like Andrew Tate are just going to keep coming in. The Jordan Petersons are going to keep coming in to fill that void that was created due to them being told that if they're not at the center, then something's wrong. And then here comes people like Jordan Peterson telling them it's not your fault, it's them. And the solution to the feelings that you have inside you is to go back to where we were before, not to consider a new reality where you could feel included with some of these marginalized groups. And that's comforting because it means that they don't have to give up anything.
What is like the solution? Like really, practically speaking, like what could people really do to counter that?
I think you need loud, influential voices in their groups to do the work because I don't think they can hear it from us. So, great example. The actor who plays Bill and Ron Swanson, his name is slipping me right now.
It starts with an N. Ned or something.
No.
Nick.
Oh, that's gonna bug me. Is it David? Nick Offerman.
That was right.
He clearly, they present him as a masculine man. Even with Bill, he's supposed to be presented as a masculine man. And that episode really breaks and tears down the idea of what masculinity is supposed to look like. Because, like, he's still a protector. He's still, like, the provider. Even in those, like, very general, basic ways of what a man's supposed to be. Like, he still maintains that. But he's in tune with his feelings. He becomes in tune with his feelings. He becomes in tune with his feelings. He embraces his sexuality. You need people who have gone through that work to talk with them. Like John Berthnall, who plays Shane in The Last of Us. He has his podcast where he only brings on guys, and they work through a lot of stuff. He had one episode with Shia LaBeouf, and I'm like, that felt like a counseling session for this guy, Shia LaBeouf, because he's able to talk through about things that he endured when he was a kid with his parents and the problems that he had, the way that he viewed women, the way that he viewed himself. All of that work was done because someone like John Berthenol, who it seemed as if he's gained the trust of a lot of guys, he's using that platform to try to deconstruct that. Even with black straight men, I start to see more responsible cishet black male podcasters use that platform to really deconstruct, like, what does it look like to be a healthy, loving, responsible guy. I don't know if it can always come from the victims because I don't know if they're there yet. They're still beginner stages. Beginner stages, you've got your training wheels. Training wheels can't come from us.
The pessimist in me is like, I've just seen so many examples where there are like like cishet men who make their platforms about that, and other cishet men then just start to treat them and speak of them the same way that they speak of other groups of people who say the same things.
Sure.
So I'm like, when that happens, that makes me feel like there's no hope.
I think you just need more of it. I follow straight guys on TikTok, white guys. They're doing the work. They'll go on the Twitch streams and they'll debate the weird conservative alpha male bro type of guy, and they'll go back and forth with them, and they win a lot of those conversations. I think sometimes it can just be hard to see the long-term ramifications of that because we're talking about, in many ways, to use a Christian term, like converting someone. And that can be over time. It could be that instant. It could be an hour after the stream ended. It could be a couple of weeks, a couple of years from now. Who knows? But I think you need people who are daring, who can stand their own, who can stand on their own, who can stand their ground in that environment to still be themselves, to maintain that level of respect and be confident in that they know what the F they're talking about. And I've seen a few people do that I'm like super impressed with. And I read through the comment section and like, it's kind of working.
It was a good episode. There's no debate about that.
We'd love to hear what you have to say. It's an important conversation for the two of us. We've thought about this a lot as we continue to sort of reconstruct our own theology. And we hope this is helpful to you all in some ways as well.